I love to find new techniques to try and then have a play and come up with my twist on the technique. Hello and welcome to Karen's Creative Cards on YouTube. I am a huge fan of Gina K from Gina K Designs, and I watched a video where she shared the idea of stamping twice on white cardstock with black ink and then cutting out one with a cover die, then putting them back together for a unique look. I pulled out every stamp set and die set I owned that might work for that technique, had a play, and I'm sharing those cards with you as well as what I've learned. I thought I would like to try different colors than just white and black, and I thought that this stamp set from Woodware Craft Collection and this die from D's Distinctively would work to make a cool card. It turned out fine. As you can see, I stamped it twice on the blue, and then I raised the die pieces up like Gina K suggested, but I found that this stamp set was a bit too detailed and the die was a bit too fine to really line it up well. It was very difficult to do. I like the card, but for this technique I would not suggest a stamp this detailed or a die quite this complicated. I had this die from Simon Hurley and Spellbinders, and I love it, and I've created many cool cards with it. And then I had this stencil from Textures by Lou Collins. It's Clouds Layering, and I thought, well, can we use stencils and make a background and then try cutting it out with this die. This is the card that I came up with. I like the look again. Can you see that? But this die was way too tiny lines, and I cut out the two white layers and tried to glue them together, and it just wasn't going to work. So I just put the second die cut one on top of the first one. The flowers are also from Textures by Lou Collins. I'll show you that stamp set in a minute. And I added a bird and a sentiment. And the card is really pretty, and there is a little bit of texture there because the top one is glued on, but again, not the same as the technique that I learned from Gina K. Then I found this die set in my stash. It's from Tim Holtz and Sizzix. It's layered plaid, and it really worked well for this technique. I decided that stamping on craft cardstock with this stamp from called Baseball in Motion from Technique Junkies might make a really cool masculine card, and it really did turn out well. I love the craft. You can see that this is raised. It's raised up a couple times. You cut the die 3 times or more or less, it's up to you, and I used the same color cardstock, so we had 2 layers of craft and then the stamp, and then you put it all back together for what turned out to be, I think, a really cool masculine card. Could be birthday or thinking of you, just about anything, especially for someone who loves baseball. And then I wondered, do we need to stamp at all? What if I just chose some pretty scenery pattern paper that I have several sheets of, and that's what I did here, and I love how this card turned out. So no stamping. That was a pretty scenery with leaves, trees, piece of pattern paper, and you have to have 2 of them, and then again you cut the die out several times. In this case I did it with dark green, glued it all together, added a couple birds, and isn't that pretty? I just love how that turned out. I'm going to try another idea I have. I have this lovely stamp from Textures by Lou Collins. It's a Wildflowers set, and this is the stamp that I really wanted to use. It has, it's not quite as fine, it has good detail to it, but it's pretty large. And so And then the die that I want to use, of course, is my favorite one for this technique. It's one of three. There's 3 dies in here of the layered plaid, but it worked out really well for those other cards. But that die is way smaller than this stamp. So I have this idea that I am going to stamp it and then just cut out part of it and put it back together. So let's see if that's going to work. So I have stamped that larger stamp once on this pretty pattern paper that I have more than one of. Make sure it's in the right way. I am planning a card that's going to be 4.5 by 6, and that one's ready to go. So I have set the MISTI up. You want to stamp it twice in exactly the same place. I have my stick and stamp mat by Brutus Monroe in here that's going to hold it in place right in the corner. And of course I have this set up in my MISTI. You really want a stamp positioner to do this with because you do want both of them to be exactly the same. I press it down with this. And as you can see, there's advantages to a stamp positioner because that didn't turn out perfectly, but we can do it again. Okay, that's much better. Now what I envisioned was cutting out just part of this with this and then putting it all back together. So parts of this will come off, of course, but it will lay on the top of the other one. And then I have 2 already die cut and glued together with black plain cardstock. So that's ready to go. So I can't have my die cutting machine on camera. It's too far away and too big. I have a very small area that I work. It doesn't look like there's a lot of poking necessary. I think that's pretty much done. So if we lay it on there and then we put it back where it lines up. Or is it like this? Because that didn't seem like, yeah, that's better, right? Okay, so I have to remember these little dots here are over to the right. So I'm going to use my favorite glue to put these pieces together. Another thing that I really like about this die is there are some really good thick lines to use when adding the glue, so that makes it go just a little bit faster. We definitely want glue all around the edge. I tend to use the intersections to do that with, but we really want to catch the corners too. And then I'll put a dot in these intersections. Okay, and then I'm going to line this up. I can't really do it black on black there, so let's and of course we have to be patient while the glue sets up. I was looking for this to sit on there. That is a good use of old acrylic blocks that we never use again because of our MISTI or our stamp positioners. Someone had suggested put a couple of them together and make a paperweight, and I did that, and then I just added my little emblem there, which of course is sideways right now, but just for fun if I do use it. And I find myself using it quite often. So I have this one ready to go on a white card base, and I am going to try to line this up and put it back together. I think I will pay a special attention to the stems there, and the stem is on the top. That would be a good thing to line up. And once again, I'm going to use my favorite glue. Do I think I want to put that on first? No, it doesn't really matter, does it? So let's get it up. So once again, aiming for those bigger areas on this plaid. Well, just look through your cover dies. You need something that's not really fine or detailed, but that of course has openings that you're going to see that stamp through. In Gina K's, of course, she used one of her favorite dies, and that would be a good one to try. I didn't have that one, but as I showed you, I did have other ones, and after having a play, this is the one that I came up with that worked the best for me. Of course, there's links to all the products that I'm featuring, and a link to Gina K's tutorial in my description box, and a link to my blog post where you can find more details on the cards. Alright, so while the glue is still moving, we're going to line this up. This one here is not good. That one's good. This one is not. Shouldn't be crooked though. That looks pretty good, huh? We're going to go for it. The glue will move for a while, but not forever, of course. I've decided not to put a sentiment on here. This would be perfect though for sympathy or thinking of you or birthday, just about anything. I think that it's a really pretty, unique technique, and I love how parts of it are raised and parts of it aren't. So now we're just going to attach this to a card base. So we have that pretty card stock that had different colors that line up, and then some pretty wildflowers that continue from the background into the top. But in this case we have flat around the edges and then a raised middle for another unique look with this technique. I want to thank Gina K for her video and this fun technique, and I hope between the two of us you've been inspired to give some of these ideas a try.